back to the fam, y'all. Welcome back to the fam. Shout out to the people who are catching us on the TV, if you have cable. Shout out to the people who are watching us on YouTube. Maybe you're catching us on Spotify. Maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's Apple. Yep. We appreciate you joining us. To my left, I've got Dr. Lisa Gunderson.
Hi, everyone.
To my right, Pamphinette Buisa, OLY.
Okay.
Today, we want to get into political apathy.
Yes.
I consume a lot of political media, and I like to know what all sides are thinking. This is a contentious year. We can't go about shooting shows without talking about the impacts of politics in our daily life. I know for me, I'm no longer surprised by what politicians do, because they will tell you something and they will try and do it. I'm more surprised at people's apathy or try to be neutral or whatever. And I'm curious about where people's bottom line is, because that changes.
Yeah, we just went through an election here in BC. We have federal elections by the time this airs, likely may have happened. There's elections happening all over the world, all over the world. And I've always been fascinated by people thinking that politics is outside their life. So I'll hear people, oh, I can't bother with that, that's politics. I don't have time for that, it's politics. But like I was saying to you all earlier, you putting on your seatbelt, that was a political decision. My ability to vote, that was a political decision. The books that my kids had to read in their curriculum, that is a political decision. The taxes people pay and they're working to do, that's political decisions. Like, there's no part of your life, the fruit you eat in your grocery store,
Shelburne Street.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
the names of our streets.
So city, whether it's city, local, school board, municipal, provincial, federal, national, international, it all matters. And so that apathy is so interesting. And right before we went to air, I was mentioning to the two of you that voter turnout has been decreasing since 1996. It was like 73% of, I guess, BC people provincially voted. And in the last election, it was down, to, I think, what was it, 40%?
40 or 50 or something.
Something like that. I need to look at that. And it's decreased. And so I guess part of the question that I have is, as all these things are heating up more and more, whether it's climate change or, your prices of food, why do we think people are so apathetic to a part of their lives that is so important to everybody's life? What do you think is going on with that?
I mean, from...
Get him, poli-sci.
You relax. I mean, at least it's interesting because, studying political science, I've seen in that space. But then in sport, I see oftentimes, that kind of apathy of not thinking that it's a political space. We need to focus on the task. And I think especially when around Olympic time, when we were doing a lot of activism and things like that, there was a lot of critiques around, are you guys distracted? These political acts, are you guys focused on what's going on? And I think for me, it was interesting because I'm representing your country is one of the most political things you can do, right? Where you go and you go to another country, the establishment of where that stadium is happening is a political place, right? So I think it's interesting how there's claims to certain spaces or institutions of neutrality. I think we were talking about, if you're federal government worker that you may not be able to run, you have to wait. And just there's certain rules around evidence of being political and how certain places it's accepted and other places it's not. So it just, I'm not too sure why that is. I mean, at least in the spaces I'm oftentimes in, it's hard to know the whole situation. And I think if you're not necessarily exposed to it in the beginning, especially in today's digital world, it's hard to digest the information in a way that is digestible and not necessarily overwhelming or skewed in a certain way, or at least being exposed to the different perspectives. So
I am going to throw some numbers at you all. So I just looked, it was 53.9% of people who voted last time. But what's interesting is it says that people aged 50 or higher, so I'm in that group, we're the highest group that turns out to vote. And more than half of people under 45 did not vote. More than half of people under 45, except for first-time voters between the ages of 18 and 23. So first-time voters, they're excited about voting and they get out there. One thing we know usually, though, is if you vote, if you can get your kids into the habit of voting, which is why we want people to pretend to vote in elementary and middle school and stuff, that you're likely to be like a lifetime voter. More active. So to your point, though, Pam, I'm wondering, so many people under, say, 40 not voting, how much of that is, like when you all are talking to, people in your world, how much of that is the social media piece? Because also that age group is the age group that's consuming all of their news on social media. It's people my age who are still using a newspaper or the apps for specific news organizations. I didn't know people got news off of Facebook. I'm like, what the heck? You read Facebook for your news? That was blowing my mind. And my sons are just on Insta and, what are they on? Insta and YouTube, right? So how are they getting, their news filtered to them? So do you all think there's something with that? Like what's happening with your age demographic?
I think it's all related. And especially, something that we talk about, there's a through line or a theme through our conversations is the power of the algorithm. So you've mentioned this multiple times. The more you look at something, the more you're going to see of it. And then you end up in an echo chamber where you're just seeing the same thing and regurgitating. We've talked about this in our tech episode. But I think it is really insidious and easy to access these things. If, I work in the settlement sector, so when we're talking about immigrants, newcomers and refugees, we know how contentious that topic is. Keep very close attention to what kind of media you're seeing online, because I'm seeing clips of a lot of rhetoric that is impacting a sector across the country. And we know that's an impact globally, but that is direct lives that are being impacted, wages, all of these other things, and most importantly, services. And all it takes is somebody to create a video that pushes a narrative that isn't actually true. And we know that youth are very impressionable.
Are the narratives telling your demographic not to vote, like it's not important to vote, or is it you should vote but vote a certain way? Like what is, or is it access to voting?
I think it's easier to access the rhetoric that is against participating, I believe that it's easier to access the rhetoric that is telling you to vote or participate a certain way.
Okay.
How I see it is that I feel like the ways of how we understand influence is completely different. I think in a lot of ways we see politicians, or historically it's been like politicians set, the framework of decision making, but influencers and content creation, like a lot of influence are not necessarily in these political spaces. It's the influencers that, are significantly impacting and directing people to make certain decisions or to sway in a certain way. So I think it's almost like the shift of where the powers are. And so I'm not necessarily getting information saying, oh, don't vote necessarily, but the emphasis is just not necessarily there, but it's how do you create influence? And that's maybe not in these concentrated, centralized areas. It's more so in other ways. Maybe it's picking up your phone and creating different truths to make your reality make more sense.
But is that real? Like in the sense that influencers who are influencing you all or behave this way or that way, but they're not literally making the laws. It's the people in those buildings, whether it's City Hall or the legislature, they're the ones that are actually making the laws that are going to impact your life. It is, I guess what I'm saying is it's real power, but is it like this kind of soft power that people are, like, I don't need to vote because it won't matter? When clearly they're going to make their decisions whether you vote for them or not, right? Like,
I mean, like, how I see it is that we see, for example, different politicians who weren't historically politicians,
Yep.
who were entertainers or business people, be in these positions, not necessarily because they had a political background, but because they had influence in certain sectors and are now influencing governments. So it's almost like the influencer direction is influencing politics in the
Power
ways,
shift.
and how the power shift is no longer in these career politicians. It's
Right.
more so in people who have made big impacts in whatever industries they're in.
so future YouTubers, you're saying, are going to be the ones who might be the future politicians, but do they think that? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they building up their channels and their numbers with that idea that one day I might be able to be in these halls of power?
They might now.
Yeah, because now we're seeing people like Michelle Obama, who has a podcast. We're seeing a lot of politicians going on podcast shows to get their words out to those
Yeah,
communities.
because you all aren't.
We're not
so
there.
is something like door knocking still because people die on the door knocking? Like they have canvas leads and all this stuff, and I'm just sitting there going, okay, that I don't even know how that really works, although the data says it does. But
Right.
that doesn't. Obama shifted a lot of that when he was one of the first politicians to go out onto social media, right? And I'm watching this fascinating thing about Twitter, like how Twitter started and listening to the guys who created it, and they're like, we had no idea that what we were doing was going to be so influential.
Yeah.
Like they just had no clue.
Yeah.
So I'm
That
curious about that.
conversation, I think, has changed now. I think we have a better grasp.
For sure.
Yes,
on
for
what-
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
For
so
sure.
I do think that people are creating with the idea or the thought of,
Influencing.
Significantly.
and
So
that's
being
in a short
politically-
period
yeah.
of time.
It's true. I watch some people on YouTube that's all they do is talk politics.
Yeah.
And they're
Right.
young
Yeah.
and they have like 2 million followers
Yeah.
or something. But I guess my question is, will that translate into people, does that translate in your all circles to people going, oh, I need to make sure I go vote. I'm registered to vote. Do you know what I'm saying? Is that,
I'm trying to think of how to answer your question or fully understand your question. Are you saying that the impact of these content creators,
Yep.
is that influencing me and my circles in how if we want to even show up? And
to actually show up and vote? Because you're not showing up and voting.
that's what the data says.
That's
yeah.
what the data says. You're not actually going to the polls and voting. So they're influencing you all, but I guess my question is to do what?
I think it does depend on where you're getting your stuff from.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think it's, I think it's influencing to, I mean, it depends who you also ask, right? It also depends where you're getting that information from. I think right now we're seeing a move of resistance of centralized government, a lot of power to the government. I think a lot of people are craving power for themselves in some sort of way. Like content creation, I think, allows for people to share and express themselves freely without having even income streams, right? Like the whole idea around being able to, if you're a content creator, that you can think about how can I generate revenue by having people listen to me, right? We're in an economy of, like, I think the attention, like, right? So we're playing into how can I captivate someone's attention quickly, keep it, and then build from there. And I think that's also the direction of where influence is going. So whether or not it's translating into the polls, I don't know.
And that's what, because I hear all that, so that's all being built here. But what's that bridge to you walking into the booth, actually picking somebody who's actually then going to shift the government into the way that you want it to be shifted? Because what's the use of having all of that influence and stuff if it literally doesn't translate into being actually in the building, like in the halls of power? Do you see what I'm saying?
I think potentially the importance, maybe the importance of participating isn't fully understood, or the choice to not participate is also just a movement in itself. But I do think that there's a level of privilege to claiming or trying to be apolitical. And I don't know if you understand.
That's an excellent point.
I don't know if people understand the impact of not even participating or choosing to participate unless it's happening to you.
Yeah, being apathetic.
You don't.
Yeah.
You don't know. So I wonder, when we talk
Yeah.
about people being politically apathetic, how many of those people are moving from a place of privilege of like, it doesn't matter. I don't need to care. I'm doing my thing.
We actually talked about that in our episode around social activism. And if you're watching today, make sure you check out our YouTube, where we talk about, in one of our episodes, the importance of, I think the first question I ask is social activism or collectivism activism.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
and
Yep.
is...
Yep.
And is it a privilege to be able to engage or disengage?
Yep.
So we actually talk
It
about
is
that
a
in one of our
privilege.
episodes. So
Yeah.
make sure you check that
That's
out.
a good look.
Yeah,
What about to-
I think that's such an important question, because if I can just step out of the conversation, it's kind of like, I don't need to worry about racism. You know, if I feel like doing something about it today, I will. If I don't, I don't. We don't have that as an option.
No.
And so the idea that voting, maybe not. So then maybe you're not dependent on some of the things that are coming out of these various spaces, because you can handle whatever's going to come your way. I mean, do you think it would make a difference if we went the way of some countries that mandate voting? That, you know, I'm about that. I'm just laying it out there. I think it should be mandatory that people vote, because in my case, different multiple identities, people died so I could have that right. As a woman, as a Black person. But I think what we need to have on the ballot is something like none of the above. Because I think part of the reason people may check out of voting they don't have anybody that they really want to vote for.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, sure, I'd love to vote, but I don't want to vote for any of these people. The problem is, if you don't vote, the system's still going to go on. In countries where you have to vote, if you don't, you get fined or whatever. But it's just more of this idea, and they have high rates, right?
I mean, if you get fined, I mean,
Right. People will find a way. But
Yeah.
I guess I don't want to have to do that. Like, I want to try to understand
this region. I mean, we live in the capital region.
Yeah.
We are steeped in privilege. We have the ability to choose. If it's not on my radar, I don't even need to look at it. It's not in my purview. It's not a part of my bottom line.
Yeah.
Why would I stress myself out in this place of privilege? All I care about is my bottom line.
So I'm going to throw out an idea that I've had.
Not me, personally. Hold on.
No,
Hold
we
on.
vote.
Get
I
that
know
on
who I
record.
am.
Get it on record.
No.
Yeah,
chill.
yeah.
That's over for me.
I want to throw this out, that there's a reason why systems try to make sure people don't vote. And that if we can convince you that your vote really doesn't matter, that your voice really can't change anything, then the small group of us who are continuously in those spaces can just do what we want to do. And I say that because many systems, not just ours, but many systems do not truly represent their populations, right? Like the leaders of the day are being voted in by 30% of the people, or 25% of the people, or, you know, it's not a majority of people who are voting for people. And so we don't like things like rank ballots, or, you know, there's other ways we could make the system, you know, let people vote for a month, right? Like during all times of day, you know, like we could make it easy. Vote on your phone and make it accessible. So for me, the deeper question is, why do we try so hard to make it so inconvenient and so challenging for especially racialized various groups to get into the space and not be reflective of the people that we serve? I think that's
the question.
I think that I'm curious if you think my idea is just but
Oh,
that's
no, I think
especially
it's-
young people, because young people are usually much more
Yeah.
radical than whatever is the establishment of the day. imagine if you all galvanized your voices, what you could literally shift and move with 2-3 million people watching you all the time. Like, you can't even knock on that many doors. Like, you know, so we just tell you your vote doesn't matter. And that's also why I think 16-year-olds should vote. But, you know, so I'm curious if you think I'm off.
No, I don't think you're off. I'm just thinking about the way that I was raised and how politics came into my life, and I was raised to participate.
So was I.
And at a certain age, I was more, I don't know, present enough to explore what it means to participate and how. I don't think everybody has that opportunity though, as well.
Absolutely. And we don't do it in school.
We don't do it. And maybe that's part of what you're talking about, what you're critiquing or giving feedback on is why. And we know it's very cliche to say, but knowledge is power.
That's very true.
And I don't think people do understand the power of their voice or how to use it. And I know working in my sector, teaching people how the pathway to participate is so key. And sometimes that's all you need to do. But it's really convoluted for people, especially when if you're coming from a different environment, you're a newcomer, you may have fears around participating, you may not even know what your rights are.
Yeah.
Like it just gets messy.
Exactly. If you're coming from a country where your vote has been suppressed or it truly does not do anything, then you come into that space. But that again means we have more responsibility to let people know that, you know. I'm concerned for your generation.
Me too.
Around, I get the power and the influence, and people, you know, it's like, oh, I have this power. But again, if it's not translating into all of these buildings, then you all still aren't going to get what it is that you desire. And so
do we even know what we want, what we desire?
I mean, like,
That's
I
a
just
good
thought of
question.
something because around, like, for some that I know actually, and I also was raised in a home to participate in things. I grew up in Ottawa. One thing I do know, and I've heard in different circles, that some people just straight up don't believe in the system generally.
Absolutely.
I've listened to a lot of people who, you know, the construction of this voting system was founded on lands that were, you know, so there's also that aspect of things of just rejecting the whole system generally, not out of privilege, but out of that the system, as a form of resistance.
That it needs to be basically blown up and start all over again.
So I've heard that language as well. But I think for me, how I think it's similar to, like, you know, accessibility. Like, we didn't learn about taxes in school. Like, there's certain things that, like, if we had access to this information early on, we'd probably be more inclined to learn it. And I think that goes down to why is it that certain information we have access to, and others we don't.
You don't.
And I think that kind of allows, for example, I mean, I studied political science, I was very passionate about it, and I learned more about it, but when it came to, for example, Indigenous governance, I only learned that when I got to British Columbia. Because a lot of what I learned wasn't necessarily that really at all. And so I think as I continued through post-secondary, that's when I was exposed to all that stuff, and therefore I was going to vote, but now it gave me even more direction where I can vote. But it took a while until I got there. So I think it depends also on the exposure you have. And to not vote may not necessarily be out of privilege. It could also be out of resistance. Whether someone shows up to the ballots or they just reject the whole thing altogether. Because as we've seen, it's not necessarily reflective of all people that are voting. So there's also that perspective as well.
And I think that would be a great conversation to have for another episode around that idea of, if you think a system is so broken that you're not willing to participate in it, even though you're part of it, because we're all part of the system, right? Is that a good tactic, right? Is that and I get it, but the question is that a good tactic?
We're in the find out phase.
We are indeed. We are indeed.
Man, you reminded me, speaking of, you know, what we learned in school, I remember one class was a pass-fail and you had to look after a bag of flour wrapped in duct tape. And if you recorded when you fed it and all of those things,
Like,
it's flower
okay,
baby.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the term you handed in determine if you passed or failed. So
Wow.
So if the bag busted, you failed.
you already know. It was
That
carnage.
sounds cutthroat. That's
It was.
That's when you go and you get a new bag.
Yeah, we,
The day
we
before,
found ways.
and
We found
you-
ways.
you duct tape
We
it
all
up.
did. Yeah, you hide your
And
baby
you
in the
just
locker.
had the baby. Yeah, yeah.
Apple. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever, because that's what you feed babies. And so you wonder why we don't participate. Our generation is cooked right now. Right?
yeah.
So I got the 2-minute warning. Do either of you have anything that you want to add before Dr. G closes this out?
I mean, I think when it comes to politics, as you said, it impacts us in every way, whether we choose to see it or not. I think asking why we don't oftentimes see it so apparently in our day-to-day should be an area for us as individuals to ask more questions as to why do I feel like this situation is not political, or why are people upset about a university name or a street name, is to lead more with curiosity, because I think that politics is how we operate as a society. That's how we make sense of the world, of what good and what bad is. And I think that the more that we can ask more of these questions, the better we can make sense of each other.
What you think?
What do you think?
I'm just going to remember what you said. Every day-to-day thing that I take it for granted or I don't think about, it is political. That includes the seatbelt. So it's the little things, and I appreciate that message.
It's your all social media, right? Who's allowed to air on your social media what that you saw when they weren't sure what was going to happen with one particular app. People were flipping out, like, oh, is it going to be here? Is it not going to be here? Etc. So it's everything. So I want to say I have hope always, because I'm a hopeful person. And I want to tell everybody out there that your voice absolutely matters. No matter what noise you're hearing around you, your voice matters. And although we have a system that is in no way, in any way, perfect at all, for right now, the system that we have requires you to actively get up and make your voice heard. And you do that through your vote. And so I am going to encourage everybody to think about how you can make your voice heard and encourage others around you to figure out how to make this something where that power that you're generating online can be translated into these buildings around you, so you can get the type of society and the type of government that you want. So it's I think a duty, because our ancestors died for us to have that privilege and honor to do that. So with that being said, I'm glad you voted today to listen to us and to join us in our fam. And so from our fam to yours, until next time, we wish you a wonderful, wonderful day. And remember, your voice matters, always.